Spacerogue by Robert Silverberg, writing as Weber Martin. Originally published in Infinity, November 1958. Narrated by Tom Trisser. Chapter 1. They were selling a Proteus in the public auction place at Borlam when the stranger wandered by. The stranger's name was Barr Herndon, and he was a tall man with a proud, lonely face. It was not the face he had been born with, though his own had been equally proud, equally lonely. He shouldered his way through the crowd. It was a warm and muggy day, and a number of idling passers-by were stopped to watch the auction. The auctioneer was an agaslid, squat and bull-voiced, and he held the squirming Proteus at arm's length, squeezing it to make it perform. "Observe, ladies and gentlemen, observe the shapes, the multitude of strange and exciting forms." The Proteus now had the shape of an 8-limbed star, blue-green at its core, fiery red in each limb. Under the auctioneer's merciless prodding, it began to change, slowly, as its molecules lost their hold on one another and sought a new conformation. A snake, a tree, a hooded deathworm. The agoslid grinned triumphantly at the crowd, baring 50-inch-long yellow teeth. "What am I bid?" he demanded in the guttural Borlamese language. "Who wants this creature from another sun's world?" "5 stellars," said a bright-painted Borlamese noblewoman down front. "5 stellars? Ridiculous, milady. Who'll begin with 50? 100? Barr Herndon squinted for a better view. He had seen Proteus life-forms before, and knew something of them. They were strange, tormented creatures, living in agony from the moment they left their native world. Their flesh flowed endlessly from shape to shape, and each change was like the wrenching apart of limbs by the rack. 50 stellars, chuckled a member of the court of Seigneur Krellig, absolute ruler of the vast world of Borlam. 50 for the Proteus. Who'll say 75, pleaded the agaslid. I brought this being here at the cost of 3 lives, slaves worth more than 100 between them. Will you make me take a loss? Surely 5,000 stellars. 75, said a voice. 80, came an immediate response. 100, said the noblewoman in the front row. The agaslid's toothy face became mellow as the bidding rose spontaneously. From his vantage point in the last row, Barr Herndon watched. The Proteus wriggled, attempted to escape, altered itself wildly and pathetically. Herndon's lips compressed tightly. He knew something himself of what suffering meant. 200, he said. A new voice, crowed the auctioneer. A voice from the back row. 500, did you say? 200, Herndon repeated coldly. 250, said a nearby noble promptly. And 25 more, a hitherto silent circus proprietor said. Herndon scowled. Now that he had entered into the situation, he was, as always, fully committed to it. He would not let the others get the Proteus. 400, he said. For an instant there was silence in the auction ring, silence enough for the mocking cry of a low-swooping seabird to be clearly audible. Then a quiet voice from the front said, 450. 500, Herndon said. 550. Herndon did not immediately reply, and the agaslid auctioneer craned his stubby neck, looking around for the next bidder. I've heard 550, he said crooningly. That's good, but not good enough. 600, Herndon said. 625. Herndon fought down a savage impulse to draw his needler and gun down his bidding opponent. Instead, he tightened his jaws and said, 650. The Proteus squirmed and became a pain-smitten pseudo-cat on the auction stand. The crowd giggled in delight. $6.75, came the voice. It had become a two-man contest now, with the others merely hanging on for the sport of it, waiting to see which man would weaken first. Herndon eyed his opponent. It was the courtier, a swarthy red-bearded man with blazing eyes and a double row of jewels round his doublet. He looked immeasurably wealthy. There was no hope of outbidding him. 700 stellars, Herndon said. He glanced around hurriedly, found a small boy standing nearby, and bent to whisper to him. 725, said the noble. Herndon whispered, You see that man down front, the one who just spoke? Run down there and tell him his lady has sent for him and wants him at once. He handed the boy a golden 5-stellar piece. The boy stared at it pop-eyed a moment, grinned, and slid through the onlookers toward the front of the ring. 900, Herndon said. It was considerably more than a Proteus might be expected to bring at auction, and possibly more than even the wealthy noble cared to spend. But Herndon was aware there was no way out for the noble except retreat, and he was giving him that avenue. 900 is bid, the auctioneer said. Lord Moaris, will you bid more? I would, Moaris grunted, but I am summoned and must leave. He looked blankly angry, but he did not question the boy's message. Herndon noted that down for possible future use. It had been a lucky guess, but Lord Moaris of the Seigneur's court came running when his lady bid him do so. 900 is bid, the auctioneer repeated. Do I hear more? 900 for this fine Proteus. Who'll make it an even 1,000? There was no one. Seconds ticked by, and no voice spoke. Herndon waited tensely at the edge of the crowd as the auctioneer chanted, At 900 once, at 900 for two, at 900 ultimate. Yours for 900, friend. Come forward with your cash, and I urge you all to return in 10 minutes, when we'll be offering some wonderful pink-hued maidens from Villadon. His hands described a feminine shape in the air with wonderfully obscene gusto. Herndon came forward. The crowd had begun to dissipate, and the inner ring was deserted as he approached the auctioneer. The Proteus had taken on a frog-like shape and sat huddled in on itself like a statue of gelatin. Herndon eyed the foul-smelling agaslid and said, I'm the one who bought the Proteus. Who gets my money? I do, croaked the auctioneer. 900 stellars gold, plus 30 stellars fee, and the beast's yours. Herndon touched the money plate at his belt, and a coil of 100-stellar links came popping forth. He counted off 9 of them, broke the link, and laid them on the desk before the agaslid. Then he drew 6 5-stellar pieces from his pocket and casually dropped them on the desk. Let's have your name for the registry, said the auctioneer after counting out the money and testing it with a oscilloscope. Barr Herndon. Homeworld? Herndon paused a moment. Borlarm. The agaslid looked up. You don't seem much like a Borlamese to me. Purebred? Does it matter to you? I am. I'm from the river country of Zonigog, and my money's good. Painstakingly, the agaslid inscribed his name in the registry. Then he glanced up insolently and said, Very well, Barr Herndon of Zonigog. You will now own a Proteus. You'll be pleased to know that is already indoctrinated and enslaved. This pleases me very much, said Herndon flatly. The agaslid handed Herndon a bright planchet of burnished copper with a 9-digit number inscribed on it. This is the code key. In case you lose your slave, take this to Borlarm Central and I'll trace it for you. He took from his pocket a tiny projector and slid it across the desk. And here's your resonator. It's tuned to a mesh network installed in the Proteus on the submolecular level. It can't change to affect it. You don't like the way the beast behaves? Just twitch the resonator. It's essential for proper discipline of slaves. Herndon accepted the resonator. He said, The Proteus probably knows enough of pain without this instrument, but I'll take it. The auctioneer seized the Proteus and scooped it down from the auction stand, dropping it next to Herndon. Here you are, friend. All yours now. The marketplace had cleared somewhat. A crowd had gathered at the opposite end, where some sort of jewel auction was going on, but as Herndon looked around, he saw he had a clear path over the cobbled square to the quay beyond. He walked a few steps away from the auctioneer's booth. The auctioneer was getting ready for the next segment of his sale, and Herndon caught a glimpse of 3 frightened-looking naked Villedon girls behind the curtain being readied for display. He stared seaward. 200 yards away was the quay, rimmed by the low sea-wall, and beyond it was the bright green expanse of the shining ocean. For an instant his eyes roved beyond the ocean even, to the far continent of Zonegog, where he had been born. Then he looked at the terrified little Proteus, halfway through yet another change of shape. 935 stellars altogether for this Proteus. Herndon scowled bitterly. It was a tremendous sum of money, far more than he could easily have afforded to throw away in one morning, particularly his first day back on Borlam after his sojourn on the outplanets. But there had been no help for it. He had allowed himself to be drawn into a situation, and he refused to back off halfway. Not any more, he said to himself, thinking of the burned and gutted Zonegog village plundered by the gay looters of Seigneur Krellig's army. Walk toward the sea-wall, he ordered the Proteus. A half-formed mouth said blurredly, Master? You understand me, don't you? Then walk toward the sea-wall. Keep going, and don't turn around. He waited. The Proteus formed feet and moved off in an uncertain shuffle over the well-worn cobbles. 935 stellars, he thought bitterly. He drew his needler. The Proteus continued walking through the marketplace and toward the sea. Someone yelled, Hey, that thing's going to fall in. We better stop it. I own it, Herndon called coolly. Keep away from it, if you value your own lives. He received several puzzled glances, but no one moved. The Proteus had almost reached the edge of the sea-wall now, and paused indecisively. Not even the lowest of life forms will welcome its own self-destruction, no matter what surcease from pain can be attained thereby. Mount the wall, Herndon called to it. Blindly, the Proteus obeyed. Herndon's finger caressed the firing knob of the needler. He watched the Proteus atop the low wall, staring down into the murky harbour water, and counted to 3. On the 3rd count, he fired. The slim needle projectile sped brightly across the marketplace and buried itself in the back of the Proteus's body. Death must have been instantaneous. The needle contained a nerve poison that was effective on all known forms of life. The creature stood frozen on the wall an instant, caught midway between changes, and toppled forward into the water. Herndon nodded and holstered his weapon. He saw people's heads nodding. He heard a murmured comment, Just paid almost 1,000 for it, and first thing it does is shoot it. It had been a costly morning. Herndon turned as if to walk on, but he found his way blocked by a small wrinkled-faced man who had come out of the jewellery auction crowd across the way. My name is Bolla Benjin, the little prune of a man said. His voice was a harsh croak. His body seemed withered and skimpy. He wore a tight grey tunic of shabby appearance. I saw what you just did. What of it? It's not illegal to dispose of slaves in public, Herndon said. Only a special kind of a man would do it, though, said Bolla Benjin. A cruel man, or a foolhardy one. Which are you? Both, Herndon said. And now, if you'll let me pass—" "Just one moment." The croaking voice suddenly acquired the snap of a whip. "Talk to me a moment. If you can spare 1,000 stellars to buy a slave you kill the next moment, you can spare me a few words." "What do you want with me?" "Your services," Benjen said. "I can use a man like you. Are you free and unbonded?" Herndon thought of the 1,000 stellars, almost half his wealth, that he had thrown away just now. He thought of the Seigneur Krellig, whom he hated and whom he had vowed so implacably to kill, and he thought of the wrinkled man before him. "I am unbonded," he said, "but my price is high. What do you want, and what can you offer?" Benjen smiled obliquely and dipped into a hidden pocket of his tunic. When he drew forth his hand, it was bright with glittering jewels. "I deal in these," he said. "I can pay well." The jewels vanished into the pocket again. "If you're interested," Benjen said, "come with me." Herndon nodded. "I'm interested." "Follow me, then." Chapter 2. Herndon had been gone from Borlarm for a year, before this day. A year before, the 17th of the reign of the Seigneur Krellig, a band of looters had roared through his home village in Zonigog, destroying and killing. It had been a high score for the Herndon family. His father and mother killed in the first sally, his young brother stolen as a slave, his sister raped and ultimately put to death. The village had been burned, and only Barr Herndon had escaped, taking with him 20,000 stellars of his family's fortune and killing 8 of the Seigneur's best men before departing. He had left the system, gone to the 19-world complex of Meld, and on Meld 17 he had bought himself a new face that did not bear the telltale features of the Zonigog aristocracy. Gone were the sharp, almost razor-like cheekbones, the pale skin, the wide-set black eyes, the nose jutting from the forehead. For 8,000 stellars, the surgeons of Meld had taken these things away and given him a new face, broad where the other had been high, tan-skinned, narrow-eyed, with a majestic hook of a nose quite unlike any of Zonigog. He had come back wearing the guise of a Spacerogue, a freebooter, an unemployed mercenary willing to sign on to the highest bidder. The Meldian surgeons had changed his face, but they had not changed his heart. Herndon nurtured the desire for revenge against Krellig. Krellig the implacable, Krellig the invincible, who cowered behind the great stone walls of his fortress for fear of the people's hatred. Herndon could be patient, but he swore death to Krellig, some day and somehow. He stood now in a narrow street in the Avenue of Bronze, high in the winding complex of streets that formed the ancient quarter of the city of Borlarm, capital of the world of the same name. He had crossed the city silently, not bothering to speak to his gnome-like companion Benjen, brooding only on his inner thoughts and hatred. Benjen indicated a black metal doorway to their left. "We go in here," he said. He touched his full hand to the metal of the door, and it jerked upward and out of sight. He stepped through. Herndon followed, and it was as if a great hand had appeared and wrapped itself about him. He struggled for a moment against the stasis field. "Damn you, Benjen! Unwrap me!" The stasis field held, calmly. The little man bustled about Herndon, removing his needler and his 4-chambered blaster and the ceremonial sword at his side. "Are you weaponless?" Benjen asked. "Yes, you must be. The field subsides." Herndon scowled. "You might have warned me. When do I get my weapons back?" "Later," Benjen said. "Restrain your temper and come within." he was led to an inner room where 3 men and a woman sat around a wooden conference table. He eyed the foursome curiously. The men comprised an odd mixture. One had the unmistakable stamp of noble birth on his face, while the other 2 had the coarseness of clay. As for the woman, she was hardly worth a second look. Slovenly, big-breasted, and raw-faced, she was undoubtedly the mistress of one or more of the others. Herndon stepped toward them. Benjen said, "This is Barr Herndon, free Spacerogue. I met him at the market. He had just bought a Proteus at auction for nearly 1,000 stellars. I watched him order the creature toward the sea-wall and put a needle in its back." "If he's that free with his money," remarked the noble-seeming one in a rich bass voice, "what need does he have of our employ?" "Tell us why you killed your slave," Benjen said. Herndon smiled grimly. "It pleased me to do so." One of the leather-jerkined commoners shrugged and said, "These space rogues don't act like normal men. Benjen, I'm not in favor of hiring him." "We need him," the withered man retorted. To Herndon he said, "Was your act an advertisement, perhaps? To demonstrate your willingness to kill and your indifference to the moral codes of humanity?" "Yes," Herndon lied. It would only hurt his own cause to explain that he had bought and then killed the Proteus, only to save it from a century-long life of endless agony. "It pleased me to kill the creature, and it served to draw your attention to me." Benjen smiled and said, "Good. Let me explain who we are, then. First, names. This is Heitman Oversk, younger brother of the Lord Moaris." Herndon stared at the noble. A second son. Ah, yes, a familiar pattern. Second sons, propertyless, but bearing within themselves the spark of nobility, frequently deviated into shadowy paths. "I had the pleasure of outbidding your brother this morning," he said. "Outbidding Moaris? Impossible!" Herndon shrugged. "His lady beckoned him in the middle of the auction, and he left. Otherwise the Proteus would have been his, and I'd have 900 stellars more in my pocket right now." "These 2, Benjen said, indicating the commoners, "are named Dorgal and Razimond. They have full voice in our organization. We know no social distinctions. And this," gesturing to the girl, "is Maria. She belongs to Dorgal, who does not object to making short-term loans." Herndon said, "I object. But state your business with me, Benjen." The dried little man said, "Fetch a sample, Razimod." The burly commoner rose from his seat and moved into a dark corner of the poorly lit room. He fumbled at a drawer for a moment, then returned with a gem that sparkled brightly even through his fisted fingers. He tossed it down on the table, where it gleamed coldly. Herndon noticed that neither Heitman Oversk nor Dorgal let their glance linger on the jewel more than a second, and he likewise turned his head aside. "Pick it up," Benjen said. The jewel was icy cold. Herndon held it lightly and waited. "Go ahead," Benjen urged. "Study it. Examine its depths. It's a lovely piece, believe me." Hesitantly, Herndon opened his cupped palm and stared at the gem. It was broad-faceted, with a luminous inner light, and, he gasped, a face within the stone. A woman's face, languorous, beckoning, seeming to call to him as from the depths of the sea. Sweat burst out all over him. With an effort he wrenched his gaze from the stone and cocked his arm. A moment later he had hurled the gem with all his force into the farthest corner of the room. He whirled, glared at Benjen, and leaped for him. "Cheat! Betrayer!" His hands sought Benjen's throat, but the little man jumped lithely back, and Dorgal and Razimond interposed themselves hastily between them. Herndon stared at Razimond's sweaty bulk a moment, and gave ground, quivering with tension. "You might have warned me," he said. Benjen smiled apologetically. "It would have ruined the test. We must have strong men in our organization. Oversk, what do you think?" "He threw down the stone," Heitman Oversk said heavily. "It's a good sign. I think I like him." "Razumod?" The commoner gave an assenting grunt, as did Dorgal. Herndon tapped the table and said, "So you're dealing in starstones, and you gave me one without warning. What if I'd succumbed?" "We would have sold you the stone and let you leave," Benjen said. "What sort of work would you have me do?" Heitman Oversk said, "Our trade is to bring starstones in from the rim worlds where they are mined and sell them to those who can afford our price. The price, incidentally, is 50,000 stellars. We pay 8,000 for them and are responsible for shipping them ourselves. We need a supervisor to control the flow of starstones from our source world to Borlarm. We can handle the rest at this end." "It pays well," Benjen added. "Your wage would be 5,000 stellars per month, plus a full voice in the organization." Herndon considered. The starstone trade was the most vicious in the galaxy. The hypnotic gems rapidly became compulsive, and within a year after being exposed to one constantly a man lost his mind and became a drooling idiot, able only to contemplate the kaleidoscopic wonders locked within his stone. The way to addiction was easy. Only a strong man could voluntarily rip his eyes from a starstone once he had glimpsed it. Herndon had proven himself strong. The sort of man who could slay a newly purchased slave could look up from a starstone. He said, "What are the terms?" "Full bonding," Benjen said, "including surgical implantation of a safety device." "I don't like that." "We all wear them," Oversk said, "even myself." "If all of you wear them," Herndon said, "to whom are you responsible?" "There is joint control. I handle the outworld contacts. Oversk here locates prospective patrons. Dorgal and Razumod are expediters who deal in collection problems and protection. We control each other." "But there must be somebody who has the master control for the safety devices," Herndon protested. "Who is that?" "It rotates from month to month. I hold them this month," Benjen said. "Next month it is Oversk's turn." Herndon paced agitatedly up and down in the darkened room. It was a tempting offer. 5,000 a month could allow him to live on high scales, and Oversk was the brother of Lord Moaris, who was known to be the Seigneur's confidant. And Lord Moaris's lady controlled Lord Moaris. Herndon saw a pattern taking shape, a pattern that ultimately would put the Seigneur Krellig within his reach. But he did not care to have his body invaded by safety devices. He knew how those worked. If he were to cheat against the organization, betray it, attempt to leave it without due cause, whoever operated the master control could reduce him to a grovelling, pain-racked slave instantly. The safety device could only be removed by the surgeon who had installed it. It meant accepting the yoke of this group of starstone smugglers. But there was a higher purpose in mind for Herndon. "I conditionally accept," he said. "Tell me specifically what my duties will be." Benjen said, "A consignment of starstones has been mined for us on our source world and is soon to be shipped. We want you to travel to that world and accompany the shipment through space to Borlarm. We lose much by way of thievery on each shipment, and there is no way of ensuring starstones against loss." "We know who our thief is," Oversk said. "You would be responsible for finding him in the act and killing him." "I'm not a murderer," Herndon said quietly. "You wear the garb of a space rogue," That doesn't speak of a very high moral caliber, Oversk said. Besides, no one mentions murder, said Benjen. Merely execution. Yes, execution. Herndon locked his hands together before him and said, I want 2 months' salary in advance. I want to see evidence that all of you are wearing neuronic mesh under your skins before I let the surgeon touch me. Agreed, Benjen said after a questioning glance around the room. Furthermore, I want as an outright gift the sum of 930 golden stellars, which I spent this morning to attract the attention of a potential employer. It was a lie, but there was cause for it. It made sense to establish a dominating relationship with these people as soon as possible. Then later, concessions on their part would come easier. Agreed, Benjen said again, more reluctantly. In that case, Herndon said, I consider myself in your employ. I'm ready to leave tonight. As soon as the conditions I state have been fulfilled to my complete satisfaction, I will submit my body to the hands of your surgeon. Chapter 3. He bound himself over to the surgeon later that afternoon, after money to the amount of 10,930 golden stellars had been deposited to his name in the Royal Borlam Bank in Galaxy Square, and after he had seen the neuronic mesh that was embedded in the bodies of Benjen, Oversk, Dorgal, and Razumod. Greater assurance of good faith than this he could not demand. He would have to risk the rest. The surgeon's quarters were farther along the Avenue of Bronze, in a dilapidated old house that had no doubt been built in Third Empire days. The surgeon himself was a wiry fellow, with a puckered ray-slash across one cheek and a foreshortened left leg. A retired pirate vessel medic, Herndon realized. No one else would perform such an operation unquestioningly. He hoped the man had skill. The operation itself took an hour, during which time Herndon was under total anesthesia. He woke to find the copper operating dome lifting off him. He felt no different, even though he knew a network of metal had been blasted into his body on the submolecular level. Well, is it finished? It is, the surgeon said. Herndon glanced at Benjen. The little man held a glinting metal object on his palm. This is the control, Herndon. Let me demonstrate. His hand closed, and instantaneously Herndon felt a bright bolt of pain shiver through the calf of his leg. A twitch of Benjen's finger, and an arrow of red heat lanced Herndon's shoulder. Another twitch, and a clammy hand seemed to squeeze his heart. Enough! Herndon shouted. He realized he had signed away his liberty forever, if Benjen chose to exert control. But it did not matter to him. He had actually signed away his liberty the day he had vowed to watch the death of the Seigneur Krellig. Benjen reached into his tunic pocket and drew forth a little leather portfolio. Your passport and other travelling necessities, he explained. I have my own passport, Herndon said. Benjen shook his head. This is a better one. It comes with a visa to Viapor. To the surgeon he said, How soon can he travel? Tonight, if necessary. Good. Herndon, you'll leave tonight. The ship was the Lord Nathir, a magnificent superliner bound on 1,000 light-year cruise to the Rim Stars. Benjen had arranged for Herndon to travel outward on a luxury liner without cost as part of the entourage of Lord and Lady Moaris. Oversk had obtained the job for him, second steward to the noble couple, who were vacationing on the rim planet of Molekkog. Herndon had not objected when he learned that he was to travel in the company of Lord, and especially Lady Moaris. The ship was the greatest of the Borlam luxury fleet. Even on Deck C, in his steward's quarters, Herndon rated a full grav room with synthic drapery and built-in chromicron. He had never lived so well, even at his parents' home, and they had been among the first people of Zonigog at one time. His duties called for him to pay court upon the nobles each evening, so that they might seem more resplendent in comparison with the other aristocrats travelling aboard. The Moarises had brought the largest entourage with them, over 100 people, including valets, stewards, cooks, and paid sycophants. Alone in his room during the hour of blast-off, Herndon studied his papers. A visa to Viapor. So that was where the Starstones came from. Viapor, the jungle planet of the Rim, where civilization barely had a toehold. No wonder the Starstone trade was so difficult to control. When the ship was safely aloft and the stasis generators had caused the translation into null space, Herndon dressed in the formal black and red court garments of Lord Moaris's entourage. Then, making his way up the broad companionway, he headed for the grand ballroom, where Lord Moaris and his lady were holding court for the first night of the voyage outward. The ballroom was festooned with ropes of living light. A dancing bear from Albiro 12 cavorted clumsily near the entrance as Herndon entered. Ball-armies in uniforms identical to his own stood watch at the door, and nodded to him when he identified himself as second steward. He stood for a moment alone at the threshold of the ballroom, watching the glittering display. The Lord Nathir was a playground of the wealthy, and a goodly number of Ball-arm's wealthiest were here, vying with the ranking nobles, the Moarises, for splendour. Herndon felt a twinge of bitterness. His people were from beyond the sea, but by rank and preference he belonged in the bright lights of the ballroom, not standing here in the garment of a steward. He moved forward. The noble couple sat on raised thrones at the far end, presiding over a dancing area in which the grab had been turned down. The couples drifted gracefully, like figures out of fable, feet touching the ground only at intervals. Herndon recognized Lord Moaris from the auction. A dour, short, thick-bodied individual he was, resplendent in his court robes, with a fierce little beard stained bright red after the current fashion. He sat stiffly upright on his throne, gripping the armrests of the carven chair as if he were afraid of floating off toward the ceiling. In the air before him shimmered the barely perceptible haze of a neutralizer field designed to protect him from the shots of a possible assassin. By his side sat his lady, supremely self-possessed and lovely. Herndon was astonished by her youth. No doubt the nobles had means of restoring lost freshness to a woman's face, but there was no way of recreating the youthful bloom so convincingly. The Lady Moaris could not have been more than 23 or 25. Her husband was several decades older. It was small wonder that he guarded her so jealously. She smiled in sweet content at the scene before her. Herndon, too, smiled, at her beauty, and at the use to which he hoped to put it. Her skin was soft pink. A wench of the bath Herndon had met below decks had told him she bathed in the cream of the ying apple twice daily. Her eyes were wide-set and clear, her nose finely made, her lips two red arching curves. She wore a dress studded with emeralds. It flowed from her like light. It was open at the throat, revealing a firm bosom and strong shoulders. She clutched a diamond-crusted sceptre in one small hand. Herndon looked around, found a lady of the court who was unoccupied at the moment, and asked her to dance. They danced silently, gliding in and out of the grav field. Herndon might have found it a pleasant experience, but he was not primarily in search of pleasant experiences now. He was concerned only with attracting the attention of the Lady Moaris. He was successful. It took time, but he was by far the biggest and most conspicuous man of the court assembled there, and it was customary for lord and lady to leave their thrones mingle with her courtiers, even dance with them. Herndon danced with lady after lady, until finally he found himself face to face with a Lady Moaris. "Will you dance with me?" she asked. Her voice was like liquid gossamer. Herndon lowered himself in a courtly bow. "I would consider it the greatest of honours, good lady." They danced. She was easy to hold. He sensed her warmness near him, and he saw something in her eyes, a distant, pinched look of pain, perhaps, that told him all was not well between lord and lady. She said, "I don't recognize you. What's your name?" "Barr Herndon, milady, of Zonigog." "Zonigog, indeed. And why have you crossed 10,000 miles of ocean to our city?" Herndon smiled and gracefully dipped her through a whirling series of pirouettes. "To seek fame and fortune, milady. Zonigog is well and good to live in, but the place to become known is the city of Borlam. For this reason I petitioned the Heightman Oversk to have me added to the retinue of the Lord Moaris." "You know Oversk, then? Well?" "Not at all well. I served him a while, then I asked to move on." "And so you go, climbing up and over your former masters, until you scramble up the shoulders of the Lord Moaris to the feet of the Seigneur. Is that the plan?" She smiled disarmingly, drawing any possible malice from the words she had uttered. Herndon nodded, saying in all sincerity, "I confess this is my aim. Forgive me, though, for saying that there are reasons that might cause me to remain in the service of the Lord Moaris longer than I had originally intended." A flush crossed her face. She understood. In a half-whisper she said, "You are impertinent. I suppose it comes with good looks and a strong body." "Thank you, milady." "I wasn't complimenting you," she said as the dance came to an end and the musicians subsided. "I was criticizing. But what does it matter? Thank you for the dance." "May I have the pleasure of milady's company once again soon?" Herndon asked. "You may, but not too soon," she chuckled. "The Lord Moaris is highly possessive. He resents it when I dance twice the same evening with one member of the court." Sadness darkened Herndon's face for a moment. "Very well, then. But I will go to viewplate A and stare at the stars a while. If the lady seeks a companion, she will find one there." She stared at him and flurried away without replying. But Herndon felt a glow of inner satisfaction. The pieces were dropping into place. The ladder was being constructed. Soon it would bring him to the throne room of the Seigneur Krellig. Beyond that, he would need no plans. Viewplate A, on the uppermost deck of the vast liner, was reserved for the first-class passengers and the members of their retinues. It was an enormous room, shrouded at all times in darkness, at one end of which a view-screen opened out onto the glory of the heavens. In null space, a hyperbolic section of space was visible at all times, the stars in weird out-of-focus colors forming a breathtaking display. Geometry went awry. A blazing panorama illuminated the room. The first-class viewing room was also known to be a trysting place. There, under cover of darkness, ladies might meet and make love to cooks, lords to scullery maids. An enterprising rogue with a no-light camera might make a fortune taking a quick shot of such a room and blackmailing his noble victims. But scanners at the door prevented such devices from entering. Herndon stood staring at the fiery gold and green of the closest stars a while, his back to the door, until he heard a feminine voice whisper to him, "Barr Herndon?" He turned. In the darkness it was difficult to tell who spoke. He saw a girl about the height of the Lady Moaris, but in the dimness of the illumination of the plate he could see it was not the lady. This girl's hair was dull red, the lady's was golden, and he could see the pale whiteness of this girl's breasts. The lady's garment, while revealing, had been somewhat more modest. This was a lady of the court, then, perhaps enamoured of Herndon, perhaps sent by the Lady Moaris as a test or as a messenger. Herndon said, "I am he. What do you want?" "I bring a message from a noble lady," came the answering whisper. Smiling in the darkness, Herndon said, "What does your mistress have to say to me?" "It cannot be spoken. Hold me in a close embrace as if we were lovers, and I will give you what you need." Shrugging, Herndon clasped the go-between in his arms with feigned passion. Their lips met, their bodies pressed tight. Herndon felt the girl's hand searching for his, and slipping something cool, metallic, into it. Her lips left his, travelled to his ear, and murmured, "This is her key. Be there in half an hour." They broke apart. Herndon nodded farewell to her, and returned his attention to the glories of the viewplate. He did not glance at the object in his hand, but merely stored it in his pocket. He counted out 15 minutes in his mind, then left the viewing room and emerged on the main deck. The ball was still in progress, but he learned from a guard on duty that the Lord and Lady Moaris had already left for sleep, and that the festivities were soon to end. Herndon slipped into a washroom and examined the key, for key it was. It was a radionic opener, and imprinted on it were the numbers 1160. His throat felt suddenly dry. The Lady Moaris was inviting him to her room for the night. Or was this a trap, and would Moaris and his court be waiting for him to gun him down and provide themselves with some amusement? It was not beyond these nobles to arrange such a thing. But still, he remembered the clearness of her eyes and the beauty of her face. He could not believe she would be party to such a scheme. He waited out the remaining 15 minutes. Then, moving cautiously along the plush corridors, he found his way to room 1160. He listened a moment. Silence from within. His heart pounded frantically, irking him. This was his first major test, possibly the gateway to all his hopes, and it irritated him that he felt anxiety. He touched the tip of the radionic opener to the door. The substance of the door blurred as the energy barricade that composed it was temporarily dissolved. Herndon stepped through quickly. Behind him, the door returned to a state of solidity. The light of the room was dim. The Lady Moaris awaited him, wearing a gauzy dressing gown. She smiled tensely at him. She seemed ill at ease. "Would I do otherwise?" "I wasn't sure. I'm not in the habit of doing things like this." Herndon repressed a cynical smile. Such innocence was touching, but highly improbable. He said nothing, and she went on, "I was caught by your face. Something harsh and terrible about it struck me. I had to send for you to know you better." Ironically, Herndon said, "I feel honoured. I hadn't expected such an invitation." "You won't think it's cheap of me, will you?" she said plaintively. It was hardly the thing Herndon expected from the lips of the noble Lady Moaris. But as he stared at her slim body revealed beneath the filmy robe, he understood that she might not be so noble after all, once the gaudy pretense was stripped away. He saw her as perhaps she truly was, a young girl of great loveliness, married to a domineering nobleman who valued her only for her use in public display. It might explain this bedchamber summons to a second steward. He took her hand. "This is the height of my ambitions, milady. Beyond this room, where can I go?" But it was empty flattery he spoke. He darkened the room illumination exultantly. "With your conquest, Lady Moaris," he thought, "do I begin the conquest of the Seigneur Krellig." Chapter 4. The voyage to Moloch lasted a week, absolute time aboard ship. After their night together, Herndon had occasion to see the Lady Moaris only twice more, and on both occasions she averted her eyes from him, regarding him as if he were not there. It was understandable, but Herndon held a promise from her that she would see him again in 3 months' time, when she returned to Borlam, and she had further promised that she would use her influence with her husband to have Herndon invited to the court of the Seigneur. The Lord Nathir emerged from null space without difficulty and was snared by the landing field of Moloch Spacefield. Through the viewing screen on his own deck, Herndon saw the colourful splendour of the pleasure planet on which they were about to land, growing larger now that they were in the final spiral. But he did not intend to remain long on the world of Moloch. He found the chief steward and applied for a leave of absence from Lord Moaris's service without pay. "But you've just joined us," the steward protested, "and now you want to leave?" "Only for a while," Herndon said. "I'll be back on Borlam before any of you are. I have business to attend to on another world in the Rim area, and then I promise to return to Borlam at my own expense to rejoin the retinue of the Lord Moaris." The chief steward grumbled and complained, but he could not find anything particularly objectionable in Herndon's intentions, and so finally he reluctantly granted the Spacerogue permission to leave Lord Moaris's service temporarily. Herndon packed his court costume and clad himself in his old Spacerogue garb. Then the great liner ultimately put down in Danzibul harbour on Moloch. Herndon was packed and ready, and he slipped off ship and into the thronged confusion of the terminal. Bolla Benjin and Heitman Oversk had instructed him most carefully on what he was to do now. He pushed his way past a file of vile-smelling lily-faced green nobon, and searched for a ticket-seller's window. He found one, eventually, and produced the prepaid travel vouchers Benjin had given him. "I want a one-way passage to Viapor," he said to the flat-featured, triple-eyed Guzmano clerk who stared out from back of the wicker screen. "You need a visa to get to Viapor," the clerk said. "These visas are issued at infrequent intervals to certified personages. I don't see how you—" "I have a visa," Herndon snapped, and produced it. The clerk blinked. 1, 2, 3, in sequence, and his pale rose face flushed deep cerise. "So you do," he remarked at length. "It seems to be in order. Passage will cost you 1,165 stellars of the realm." "I'll take a third-class ship," Herndon said. "I have a paid voucher for such a voyage." He handed it across. The clerk studied it for a long moment, then said, "You have planned this very well. I accept the voucher. Here." Herndon found himself holding one paid passage to Viapor aboard the freight ship Zalazar. The Zalazar turned out to be very little like the Lord Nathir. It was an old-fashioned unitube ship that rattled when it blasted off, shivered when it translated to null space, and quivered all the week-long journey from Moloch to Viapor. It was indeed a third-class ship. Its cargo was hardware, 75,000 dry strainers, 80,000 presses, 60,000 multiple fuse screens, guarded by a supercargo team of 8 taciturn Ludvuri. Herndon was the only human aboard. Humans did not often get visas to Viapor. They reached Viapor 7 days and a half after setting out from Moloch. Ground temperature as they disembarked was well over 100. Humidity was overpowering. Herndon knew about Viapor. It held perhaps 500 humans, one spaceport, infinite varieties of deadly local life, and several thousand non-humans of all descriptions, some of them hiding, some of them doing business, some of them searching for starstones. Herndon had been well briefed. He knew who his contact was, and he set about meeting him. There was only one settled city on Viapor, and because it was the only one, it was nameless. Herndon found a room in a cheap boarding-house run by a swine-eared dumb brune, and washed the sweat from his face with the unpleasantly acrid water of the tap. Then he went downstairs into the bright noonday heat. The stench of rotting vegetation drifted in from the surrounding jungle on a faint breeze. Herndon sat at the desk. "I'm looking for a Vonimuru named Maudlin. Is he around?" "Over there," said the proprietor, pointing. Maudlin, the Vonimuru, was a small, weaselly-looking creature with a protuberant snout, untrustworthy yellow eyes, and pebbly brown-purple fur of his people. He looked up when Herndon approached. When he spoke, it was in lingua spacia, with a whistling, almost obscene inflection. "You looking for me?" "It depends," Herndon said. "Are you Maudlin?" The jackal creature nodded. Herndon lowered himself to a nearby seat and said in a quiet voice, "Bolla Benjin sent me to meet you. Here are my credentials." He tossed a milky-white clouded cube on the table between them. Maudlin snatched it up hastily in his leathery claws and nudged the activator. An image of Bolla Benjin appeared in the cloudy depths, and a soft voice said, "Benjin speaking. The bearer of this cube is known to me, and I trust him fully in all matters. You are to do the same. He will accompany you to Borlam with the consignment of goods." The voice died away, and the image of Benjin vanished. The jackal scowled. He muttered, "If Benjin sent a man to convey his goods, why must I go?" Herndon shrugged. "He wants both of us to make the trip, it seems. What do you care? You're getting paid, aren't you?" "And so are you," snapped Maudlin. "It isn't like Benjin to pay two men to do the same job, and I don't like you, rogue." "Mutual," Herndon responded heartily. He stood up. "My orders say I'm to take the freighter Dawnlight back to Borlam tomorrow evening. I'll meet you here 1 hour before to examine the merchandise." He made one other stop that day. It was a visit with Brent, a jewel-monger of Viapor, who served as the funnel between the native Starstone miners and Benjin's courier, Maudlin. Herndon gave his identifying cube to Brent and said, once he had satisfactorily proven himself, "I'd like to check your books on the last consignment." Brent glanced up sharply. "We keep no books on Starstones, idiot. What do you want to know?" Herndon frowned. "We suspect our courier of diverting some of our stones to his own pocket. We have no way of checking up on him, since you can't ask for vouchers of any kind in Starstone traffic." The Viaporan shrugged. "All couriers steal." "Starstones cost us 8,000 stellars apiece," Herndon said. "We can't afford to lose any of them at that price. Tell me how many are being sent in the current shipment." "I don't remember," Brent said. Scowling, Herndon said, "You and Maudlin are probably in league. We have to take his word for what he brings us, but always 3 or 4 of the stones are defective. We believe he buys, say, 40 stones from you, pays the 320,000 stellars over to you from the account we provide, and then takes 3 or 4 from the batch and replaces them with identical but defective stones worth 100 stellars or so apiece. The profit to him is better than 20,000 stellars a voyage. Or else," Herndon went on, "you deliberately sell him defective stones at 8,000 stellars. But Maudlin's no fool, and neither are we." "What do you want to know?" the Viaporan asked. "How many functional starstones are included in the current consignment?" Sweat poured down Brent's face. 39, he said after a long pause. "And did you also supply Maudlin with some blanks to substitute for any of these 39? No, Brent said. "Very good," said Herndon. He smiled. "I'm sorry to have seemed so overbearing, but we had to find out this information. Will you accept my apologies and shake?" He held out his hand. Brent eyed it uncertainly, then took it. With a quick inward twitch, Herndon jabbed a needle into the base of the other's thumb. The quick-acting truth drug took only seconds to operate. "Now," Herndon said, "the preliminaries are over. You understand the details of our earlier conversation. Tell me, now, how many starstones is Maudlin paying you for?" Brent's fleshless lips curled angrily, but he was defenseless against the drug. 39, he said. "At what total cost?" 312,000 stellars. Herndon nodded. "How many of those 39 are actually functional starstones?" 35, Brent said reluctantly. "The other 4 are duds?" "Yes." "A sweet little racket. Did you supply Maudlin with the duds?" "Yes, at 200 stellars each." "And what happens to the genuine stones that we pay for, but that never arrive on Borlam?" Brent's eyes rolled despairingly. Maudlin sells them to someone else and pockets the money. I get 500 stellars per stone for keeping quiet." "You've kept very quiet today," Herndon said. "Thanks very much for the information, Brent. I really should kill you, but you're much too valuable to us for that. We'll let you live, but we're changing the terms of our agreement. From now on, we pay you only for actual functioning starstones, not for an entire consignment. Do you like that setup?" "No," Brent said. "At least you speak truthfully now, but you're stuck with it. Maudlin is no longer courier, by the way. We can't afford a man of his tastes in our organization. I don't advise you to try to make any deals with his successor, whoever he is." He turned and walked out of the shop. Herndon knew that Brent would probably notify Maudlin that the game was up immediately, so the Vonimuro would attempt to get away. Herndon was not particularly worried about Maudlin escaping, since he had a weapon that would work on the jackal creature at any distance whatever. But he had sworn an oath to safeguard the Combine's interests, and Herndon was a man of his oath. Maudlin was in possession of 39 starstones, for which the Combine had paid. He did not want the Vonimuro to take those with him. He legged it across town hurriedly to the house where the courier lived while at the Viapor end of his route. It took him 15 minutes from Brent's to Maudlin's, more than enough time for a warning. Maudlin's room was on the second story. Herndon drew his weapon from his pocket and knocked. "Maudlin?" There was no answer. Herndon said, "I know you're in there, Jackal. The game's all over. You might as well open the door and let me in." A needle came whistling through the door, embedded itself against the opposite wall after missing Herndon's head by inches. Herndon stepped out of range and glanced down at the object in his hand. It was the master control for the neuronic network installed in Maudlin's body. It was quite carefully gradated. Shifting the main switch to 6 would leave the Vonimuro in no condition to fire a gun. Thoughtfully, Herndon nudged the indicator up through the degrees of pain to 6 and left it there. He heard a thud within. Putting his shoulder to the door, he cracked it open with one quick heave. He stepped inside. Maudlin lay sprawled in the middle of the floor, writhing in pain. Near him, but beyond his reach, lay the needler he had dropped. A suitcase sat open and half-filled on the bed. He had evidently intended an immediate getaway. "Shut that thing off," Maudlin muttered through pain-twisted lips. "First, some information," Herndon said cheerfully. "I just had a talk with Brent. He says you've been doing some highly improper things with our starstones. Is this true?" Maudlin quivered on the floor, but said nothing. Herndon raised the control a quarter of a notch, intensifying the pain, but not yet bringing it to the killing range. "Is this true?" he repeated. Yes, damn you, shut it off." "At the time you had the network installed in your body, It was with the understanding that you'd be loyal to the Combine, and so it would never need to be used. But you took advantage of circumstances and cheated us. Where's the current consignment of stones?" "Suitcase lining," Maudlin muttered. "Good," Herndon said. He scooped up the needler, pocketed it, and shut off the master control switch. The pain subsided in the Vonimuro's body, and he lay slumped, exhausted, too battered to rise. Efficiently, Herndon ripped away the suitcase lining and found the packet of starstones. He opened it. They were wrapped in shielding tissue that protected any accidental viewer. He counted through them. There were 39, as Brent had said. "Are any of these defective?" he asked. Maudlin looked up from the floor, with eyes yellow with pain and hatred. "Look through them and see." Instead of answering, Herndon shifted the control switch past 6 again. Maudlin doubled up, clutching his head with claw-like hands. Yes, 6 defectives." "Which means you sold 6 good ones for 48,000 stellars, less the 3,000 you kicked back to Brent to keep quiet. So there should be 45,000 stellars here that you owe us. Where are they?" "Dresser drawer, top." Herndon found the money, neatly stacked. The second time he shut off the control device, and Maudlin relaxed. "Okay," Herndon said. "I have the cash and I have the stones, but there must be thousands of stellars that you've previously stolen from us." "You can have that too, only don't turn that thing on again, please." Shrugging, Herndon said, "There isn't time for me to hunt down the other money you stole from us, but we can ensure against your doing it again." He fulfilled the final part of Benjamin's instructions by turning the control switch to 10, the limit of sentient endurance. Every molecule of Maudlin's wiry body felt unbearable pain. He screamed and danced on the floor, but only for a moment. Nerve cells unable to handle the overload of pain stimuli short-circuited. In seconds, his brain was paralyzed. In less than a minute, he was dead, though his tortured limbs still quivered with convulsive post-mortuary jerks. Herndon shut the device off. He had done his job. He felt neither revulsion nor glee. All this was merely the preamble to what he regarded as his ultimate destiny. He gathered up jewels and money and walked out. Chapter 5. A month later, he arrived on Borlam via the freighter Dawnlight, as scheduled, and passed through customs without difficulty, despite the fact that he was concealing more than 300,000 stellars worth of proscribed starstones on his person. His first stop was the Avenue of Bronze, where he sought out Benjin and the Heightman Oversk. He explained crisply and briefly his activities since leaving Borlam, neglecting to mention the matter of the shipboard romance with the Lady Moaris. While he spoke, both Benjin and Oversk stared eagerly at him, and when he told of intimidating Brent and killing the treacherous Maudlin, they beamed. Herndon drew the packet of starstones from his cloak and laid them on the wooden table. "There," he said, "the starstones. There were some defectives, as you know, and I've brought back cash for them." He added 45,000 stellars to the pile. Benjin quickly caught up the money and the stones and said, "You've done well, Herndon. Better than we expected. It was a lucky day when you killed that Proteus." "Will you have more work for me?" Oversk said. "Of course. You'll take Maudlin's place as a courier. Didn't you realize that?" Herndon had realized it, but it did not please him. He wanted to remain on Borlam, now that he had made himself known to the Lady Moaris. He wanted to begin his climb toward Krellig, and if he were to shuttle between Viapor and Borlam, the all-important advantage he had attained would be lost. But the Lady Moaris would not be back on Borlam for nearly 2 months. He could make one more round trip for the Combine without seriously endangering his position. After that, he would have to find some means of leaving the service. Of course, if they preferred to keep him on, they could compel him, but— "When do I make the next trip?" he asked. Benjen shrugged lazily. "Tomorrow, next week, next month? Who knows? We have plenty of stones on hand. There is no hurry for the next trip. You can take a vacation now while we sell these." "No," Herndon said. "I want to leave immediately." Oversk frowned at him. "Is there some reason for the urgency?" "I don't want to stay on Borlam just now," Herndon said. "There's no need for me to explain further. It pleases me to make another trip to Viapor." "He's eager," Benjen said. "It's a good sign." "Maudlin was eager at first, too," Oversk remarked balefully. Herndon was out of his seat and at the nobleman's throat in an instant. His needler grazed the skin of Oversk's Adam's apple. "If you intend by that comparison to imply—" Benjen tugged at Herndon's arm. "Sit down, rogue, and relax. The Heightman is tired tonight, and the words slipped out. We trust you. Put the needler away." Reluctantly, Herndon lowered the weapon. Oversk, white-faced despite his tan, fingered his throat where Herndon's weapon had touched it, but said nothing. Herndon regretted his hasty action and decided not to demand an apology. Oversk still could be useful to him. "A space rogue's word is his bond," Herndon said. "I don't intend to cheat you. When can I leave?" "Tomorrow, if you wish," Benjen said. "We'll cable Brent to have another shipment ready for you." This time he travelled to Viapor aboard a transport freighter, since there were no free tours with noblemen to be had at this season. He reached the jungle world a little less than a month later. Brent had 32 jewels waiting for him. 32 glittering little starstones, each in its protective sheath, each longing to rob some man's mind away with its beckoning dreams. Herndon gathered them up and arranged a transfer of funds to the amount of 256,000 stellars. Brent eyed him bitterly throughout the whole transaction, but it was obvious that the Viaporan was in fear for his life and would not dare attempt duplicity. No word was said of Maudlin or his fate. Bearing his precious burden, Herndon returned to Borlam aboard a second-class liner out of Deerhav, a neighbouring world of some considerable population. It was expensive, but he could not wait for the next freight ship. By the time he returned to Borlam, the Lady Moaris would have been back several weeks. He had promised the steward he would rejoin Moaris's service, and it was a promise he intended to keep. It had become winter when he reached Borlam again with his jewels. The daily sleet rains sliced across the cities and the plains, showering them with billions of icy knife-like particles. People huddled together, waiting for the wintry cold to end. Herndon made his way through streets clogged with snow that glistened blue-white in the light of the glinting winter moon, and delivered his gems to Oversk in the Avenue of Bronze. Benjen, he learned, would be back shortly. He was engaged in an important transaction. Herndon warmed himself by the heat wall and accepted cup after cup of Oversk's costly Thrusian blue wine to ease his inner chill. The commoner Dorgal entered after a while, followed by Maria and Razumod, and together they examined the new shipment of starstones Herndon had brought back, storing them with the rest of their stock. At length Benjen entered. The little man was almost numb with cold, but his voice was warm as he said, "The deal is settled, Oversk. Oh, Herndon, you're back, I see. Was it a good trip?" "Excellent," Herndon said. Oversk remarked, "You saw the Secretary of State, I suppose, not Krellig himself." "Naturally. Would Krellig let someone like me into his presence?" Herndon's ears rose at the mention of his enemy's name. He said, "What's this about the Seigneur?" "A little deal," Benjen chortled. "I've been doing some very delicate negotiating while you were away. and I signed the contract today." "What contract?" Herndon demanded. "We have a royal patron now, it seems. The Seigneur Krellig has gone into the Starstone business himself. Not in competition with us, though. He's bought a controlling interest in us." Herndon felt as if his vital organs had been transmuted to lead. In a congealed voice he said, "And what are the terms of this agreement?" "Simple. Krellig realized the Starstone trade, though illegal, was unstoppable. Rather than alter the legislation and legalize the trade, which would be morally undesirable, and which would also tend to lower the price of the gems, he asked the Lord Moaris to place him in contact with some group of smugglers who would work for the crown. Moaris, naturally, suggested his brother. Oversk preferred to let me handle the negotiations, and for the past month I've been meeting secretly with Krellig's Secretary of State to work out a deal." "The terms of which are?" "Krellig guarantees us immunity from prosecution, and at the same time promises to crack down heavily on our competition. He pledges us a Starstone monopoly, in other words, and so we'll be able to lower our price to Brent and jack up the selling price to whatever the traffic will bear. In return for this, we turn over 8% of our gross profits to the Seigneur and agree to supply him with 6 Starstones annually, at cost, for the Seigneur to use as gifts to his enemies. Naturally, we also transfer our fealties from the Combine to the Seigneur himself. He holds our controls to assure loyal service." Herndon sat as if stunned. His hands felt chilled. Coldness rippled through his body. Loyalty to Krellig? His enemy? The person he had sworn to destroy? The conflict seared through his mind and body. How could he fulfill his earlier vow, now that his diametrically opposed one was in effect? Transfer of fealty was a common thing. By the terms of Benjen's agreement, Herndon now was a sworn vassal of the Seigneur. If he killed Krellig, that would violate his bond. If he served the Seigneur in all faith, he would break trust with himself and leave home and parents unavenged. It was an impossible dilemma. He quivered with the strain of resolving it. "The Spacerogue doesn't look happy about the deal," Oversk commented. "Or are you sick, Herndon?" "I'm all right," Herndon said stonily. "It's the cold outside, that's all. Chills a man." Fealty to Krellig! Behind his back they had sold themselves and him to the man he hated most. Herndon's ethical code was based entirely on the concept of loyalty and unswerving obedience, of the sacred nature of an oath. But now he found himself bound to 2 mutually exclusive oaths. He was caught between them, racked and drawn apart. The only escape from the torment was death. He stood up. "Excuse me," he said. "I have an appointment elsewhere in the city. You can reach me at my usual address if you need me for anything." It took him the better part of a day to get to see the chief steward of Moaris Keep and explain to him that he had been unavoidably detained in the far worlds, and that he fully intended to re-enter the Moaris' service and perform his duties loyally and faithfully. After quite some wrangling, he was reinstated as one of the second stewards, and given functions to carry out in the daily life of the sprawling residence that was Moaris Keep. Several days passed before he caught as much as a glimpse of the Lady Moaris. That did not surprise him. The keep covered 15 acres of Bolam City, and Lord and Lady occupied private quarters on the uppermost level, the rest of the huge place being devoted to libraries, ballrooms, art galleries, and other housings for the Moaris treasures, all of these rooms requiring a daily cleaning by the household staff. He saw her finally, as he was passing through the 5th-level hallway in search of the ramp that would take him to his next task, cataloguing the paintings of the 6th-level gallery. He heard a rustle of crinoline first, and then she proceeded down the hall, flanked on each side by copper-coloured Toppidan giants, and in front and back by glistening-gowned ladies-in-waiting. The Lady Moaris herself wore sheer garments that limned the shapely lines of her body. Her face was sad, it seemed to Herndon, as he saw her from afar, that she was under some considerable strain. He stepped to one side to let the procession go past, but she saw him, and glanced quickly to the side at which he stood. Her eyes widened in surprise as she recognized him. He did not dare a smile. He waited until she had moved on, but inwardly he gloated. It was not difficult to read the expression in her eyes. Later that day, a blind Aggerslid servant came up to him and silently handed him a sealed note. Herndon pocketed it, waiting until he was alone in a corridor that was safe from the Lord Moaris's spy rays. He knew it was safe. The spy ray in that corridor had been defective, and he himself had removed it that morning, meaning to replace it later in the day. He broke the seal. The note said simply, "I have waited a month for you. Come to me tonight. M is to spend the night at the Seigneur's palace. Carla will admit you." The photonically sensitized ink faded from sight in a moment. The paper was blank. He thrust it in a disposal hatch, smiling. He quietly made his way toward the 11th level chamber of the Lady Moaris when the keep had darkened for the night. Her lady-in-waiting, Carla, was on duty, the bronze-haired one who had served as a go-between aboard the Lord Nathir. Now she wore night robes of translucent silk, a test of his fidelity, no doubt. Herndon carefully kept his eyes from her body and said, "I am expected." "Yes, come with me." It seemed to him that the look in her eyes was a strange one. Desire? Jealousy? Hatred, perhaps? But she turned and led him within, down corridors lit only with a faint night glow. She nudged an opener. A door before him flickered and was momentarily nullified. He stepped through, and it returned to the solid state behind him. The Lady Moaris was waiting. She wore only the filmiest of gowns, and the longing was evident in her eyes. Herndon said, "Is this safe?" "It is. Moaris is away at Krellig's." Her lip curled in a bitter scowl. "He spends half his nights there, toying with the Seigneur's cast-off women. The room is sealed against spy rays. There's no way he can find out you've been here." "And the girl, Carla? You trust her?" "As much as I can trust anyone." Her arms sought his shoulders. "My rogue," she murmured. "Why did you leave us at Molekcog?" "Business of my own, milady." "I missed you. Molekcog was a bore without you." Herndon smiled gravely. "Believe me, I didn't leave you because I chose to, but I had sworn to carry out duty elsewhere." She pulled him urgently to her. Herndon felt pity for this lonely noblewoman, first in rank among the ladies of the court, condemned to seek lovers among the stewards and grooms. "Anything I have is yours," she promised him. "Ask for anything, anything." "There is one prize you might secure for me," Herndon said grimly. "Name it. The cost doesn't matter." "There is no cost," Herndon said. "I simply seek an invitation to the court of the Seigneur. You can secure this through your husband. Will you do it for me?" "Of course," she whispered. She clung to him hungrily. "I'll speak to Moaris tomorrow." Chapter 6. At the end of the week, Herndon visited the Avenue of Bronze and learned from Bolla Benjin that sales of the Starstones proceeded well, that the arrangement under royal patronage was a happy one, and that they would soon be relieved of most of their stock. It would, therefore, be necessary for him to make another trip to Viapor during the next several weeks. He agreed, but requested an advance of 2 months' salary. "I don't see why not," Benjen agreed. "You're a valuable man, and we have the money to spare." He handed over a draft for 10,000 stellars. Herndon thanked him gravely, promised to contact him when it was time for him to make the journey to Viapor, and left. That night he departed for Meld 17, where he sought out the surgeon who had altered his features after his flight from sacked Zonigog. He requested certain internal modifications. The surgeon was reluctant, saying the operation was a risky one, very difficult, and entailed a 50% chance of total failure, but Herndon was stubborn. It cost him 25,000 stellars, nearly all the money he had, but he considered the investment a worthy one. He returned to Borlam the next day. A week had elapsed since his departure. He presented himself at Moaris Keep, resumed his duties, and once again spent the night with the Lady Moaris. She told him that she had wangled a promise from her husband, and that he was soon to be invited to court. Moaris had not questioned her motives, and she said the invitation was a certainty. Some days later, a message was delivered to him, addressed to Barr Herndon of Zonigog. It was in the hand of the private secretary to Moaris, and it said that the Lord Moaris had chosen to exert his patronage in favour of Barr Herndon, and that Herndon would be expected to pay his respects to the Seigneur Krellig. The invitation from the Seigneur came later in the day, borne by a resplendent Toppidan footman, commanding him to present himself at the court reception the following evening, on pain of displeasing the Seigneur. Herndon exulted. He had attained the pinnacle of Borlamese success now. He was to be allowed into the presence of the sovereign. This was the culmination of all his planning. He dressed in the court robes that he had purchased weeks before for just such an event, robes that had cost him more than 1,000 stellars, sumptuous with inlaid precious gems and rare metals. He visited a tonsorial parlour, and had an artificial beard affixed, in the fashion of many courtiers who disliked growing beards, but who desired to wear them at ceremonial state functions. He was bathed and combed, perfumed, and otherwise prepared for his debut at court. He also made certain that the surgical modifications performed on him by the Meldian doctor would be effective when the time came. The shadows of evening dropped. The moons of Borlam rose, dancing brightly across the sky. The evening fireworks display cast brilliant light through the winter sky, signifying that this was the birth month of Borlam's seigneur. Herndon sent for the carriage he had hired. It arrived, a magnificent 4-tube model, bright with gilt paint, and he left his shabby dwelling-place. The carriage soared into the night sky. 12 minutes later, it descended in the courtyard of the Grand Palace of Borlam, that monstrous heap of masonry that glowered down at the capital city from the impregnable vantage point of the Hill of Fire. Floodlights illuminated the Grand Palace. Another man might have been stirred by the imposing sight. Herndon merely felt an upwelling of anger. Once his family had lived in a palace too. Not of this size, to be sure, for the people of Zonigog were modest and unpretentious in their desires, but it had been a palace all the same, until the armies of Krellig razed it. He dismounted from his carriage and presented his invitation to the haughty seigneurial guards on duty. They admitted him, after checking to see that he carried no concealed weapons, and he was conducted to an antechamber in which he found the Lord Moaris. "So you're Herndon," Moaris said speculatively. He squinted and tugged at his beard. Herndon compelled himself to kneel. "I thank you for the honour your grace bestows upon me this night." "You needn't thank me," Moaris grunted. "My wife asked for your name to be put on my invitation list, but I suppose you know all that. You look familiar, Herndon. Where have I seen you before?" Presumably, Moaris knew that Herndon had been employed in his own service, but he merely said, "I once had the honour of bidding against you for a captive Proteus in the slave market, my lord." A flicker of recognition crossed Moaris's seamed face, and he smiled coldly. "I seem to remember," he said. A gong sounded. "We mustn't keep the Seigneur waiting," said Moaris. "Come." Together they went forward to the grand chamber of the Seigneur of Borlam. Moaris entered first, as befitted his rank, and took his place to the left of the monarch, who sat on a raised throne decked with violet and gold. Herndon knew protocol. He knelt immediately. "Rise," the Seigneur commanded. His voice was a dry whisper, feathery-sounding, barely audible, and yet commanding all the same. Herndon rose and stared levelly at Krellig. The monarch was a tiny man, dried and fleshless. He seemed almost to be a humpback. Two beady, terrifying eyes glittered from a wrinkled, world-weary face. Krellig's lips were thin and bloodless, his nose a savage slash, his chin wedge-shaped. Herndon let his eyes rove. The hall was huge, as he had expected. Vast pillars supported the ceiling, and rows of courtiers flanked the walls. There were women, dozens of them, the Seigneur's mistresses, no doubt. In the middle of the hall hung suspended something that looked to be a giant cage, completely cloaked in thick draperies of red velvet. Some pet of the Seigneur's probably lurked within. A vicious pet, Herndon theorized. Possibly a Vilidoni gyrfalcon with honed talons. "Welcome to the court," the Seigneur murmured. "You are the guest of my friend Moaris, eh?" "I am, sire," Herndon said. In the quietness of the hall his voice echoed crackingly. "Moaris is to provide us all with some amusement this evening," remarked the monarch. The little man chuckled in anticipatory glee. "We are very grateful to your sponsor, the Lord Moaris, for the pleasure he is to bring us this night." Herndon frowned. He wondered obscurely whether he was to be the source of amusement. He stood his ground, unafraid. Before the evening had ended, he himself would be amused at the expense of the others. "Raise the curtain," Krellig commanded. Instantly 2 Toppidan slaves emerged from the corners of the throne-room and jerked simultaneously on heavy cords that controlled the curtain over the cage. Slowly, the thick folds of velvet lifted, revealing, as Herndon had suspected, a cage. There was a girl in the cage. She hung suspended by her wrists from a bar mounted at the roof of the cage. She was naked. The bar revolved, turning her like an animal trussed to a spit. Herndon froze, not daring to move, staring in sudden astonishment at the slim, bare body hanging there. It was a body he knew well. The girl in the cage was the Lady Moaris. Seigneur Krellig smiled benignly. He murmured in a gentle voice, "Moaris, the show is yours, and the audience awaits. Don't keep us waiting." Moaris slowly moved toward the center of the ballroom floor. The marble under his feet was brightly polished and reflected him. His boots thundered as he walked. He turned, facing Krellig, and said in a calm, controlled tone, "Ladies and gentlemen of the Seigneur's court, I beg leave to transact a little of my domestic business before your eyes. The lady in the cage, as most of you, I believe, are aware, is my wife." A ripple of hastily hushed comment was emitted by the men and women of the court. Moaris gestured, and a spotlight flashed upward, illuminating the woman in the cage. Herndon saw that her wrists were cruelly pinioned, and that the blue veins stood out in sharp relief against her pale arms. She swung in a small circle as the bar above her turned in its endless rotation. Beads of sweat trickled down her back and down her stomach, and the harsh sobbing intake of her breath was audible in the silence. Moaris said casually, "My wife has been unfaithful to me. A trusted servant informed me of this not long ago. She has cheated me several times with no less a personage than an obscure member of our household, a groom or a lackey or some other person. When I questioned her, she did not deny this accusation. The Seigneur," Moaris bowed in a thronewood direction, "has granted me permission to chastise her here, to provide me with greater satisfaction, and you with a moment of amusement." Herndon did not move. He watched as Moaris drew from his sash a glittering little heat gun. Calmly the nobleman adjusted the aperture to minimum. He gestured. A side of the cage slid upward, giving him free target. He lifted the heat gun. Flick! A bright tongue of flame licked out, and the girl in the cage uttered a little moan as a pencil-thin line was seared across her flanks. Flick! Again the beam played across her body. Flick! Again. Lines of pain were traced across her breasts, her throat, her knees, her back. She revolved helplessly as Moaris amused himself, carving line after line along her body with a heat ray. It was only with an effort that Herndon held still. The members of the court chuckled as the Lady Moaris writhed and danced in an effort to escape the inexorable lash of the beam. Moaris was an expert. He sketched patterns on her body, always taking care that the heat never penetrated below the upper surface of the flesh. It was a form of torture that might endure for hours, until the blood bubbled in her veins and she died. Herndon realized the Seigneur was peering at him. "Do you find this courtly amusement to your taste, Herndon?" Krellig asked. "Not quite, sire." A hum of surprise rose that such a newcomer to the court should dare to contradict the Seigneur. "I would prefer a quicker death for the lady." "And rob us of our sport?" Krellig asked. "I would indeed do that," said Herndon. Suddenly he thrust open his jewelled cloak. The Seigneur cowered back as if he expected a weapon to come forth, but Herndon merely touched a plate in his chest, activating the device that the Meldian had implanted in his body. The neuronic mesh functioned in reverse. Gathering a charge of deadly force, it sent the bolt surging along Herndon's hand. A bright arc of fire leaped from Herndon's pointing finger and surrounded the girl in the cage. "Bah!" she screamed, breaking her silence at last, and died. Again Herndon discharged the neuronic force, and Moaris, his hands singed, dropped his heat gun. "Allow me to introduce myself," Herndon said, as Krellig stared white-faced at him and the nobles of the court huddled together in fright. "I am Barr Herndon, son of the first Earl of Zonigog. Somewhat over a year ago, a courtier's jest roused you to lay waste to your fief of Zonigog and put my family to the sword. I have not forgotten that day." "Seize him!" Krellig shrieked. "Anyone who touches me will be blasted with the fire," Herndon said. "Any weapon directed at me will recoil upon its owner. Hold your peace and let me finish. I am also Barr Herndon, second steward to Lord Moaris, and the lover of the woman who died before you. It must comfort you, Moaris, to know that the man who cuckolded you was no mere groom, but a noble of Zonigog." "I am also," Herndon went on, in the dead silence, "Barr Herndon, the Spacerogue, driven to take up a mercenary's trade by the destruction of my household. In that capacity I became a smuggler of starstones and," he bowed, "through an ironic twist, found myself owing a debt and fealty to none other than you, Seigneur. I hereby revoke that oath of fealty, Krellig, and for the crime of breaking an oath to my monarch I sentence myself to death. But also, Krellig, I order a sentence of death upon your head for the wanton attack upon my homeland. And you, Moaris, for your cruel and barbaric treatment of this woman whom you never loved, you must die too. And all of you, you onlookers and sycophants, you courtiers and parasites, you too must die. And you, the court clowns, the dancing bears and captive life-forms of far worlds, I will kill you too, as once I killed a slave Proteus, not out of hatred, but simply to spare you from further torment. He paused. The hall was terribly silent. Then someone to the right of the throne shouted, "He's crazy! Let's get out of here!" He dashed for the great doors, which had been closed. Herndon let him get within 10 feet of safety, then blasted him down with a discharge of life force. The mechanism within his body recharged itself, drawing its power from the hatred within him and discharging through his fingertips. Herndon smiled at Lord Moaris, pale now. He said, "I'll be more generous to you than you to your lady. A quick death for you." He hurled a bolt of force at the nobleman. Moaris recoiled, but there was no hiding possible. He stood bathed in light for a moment, and then the charred husk dropped to the ground. A second bolt raked the crowd of courtiers. A third Herndon aimed at the throne. The costly hangings of the throne area caught first, and Krellig half rose before the bolt of force caught him and hurled him back, dead. Herndon stood alone in the middle of the floor. His quest was at its end. He had achieved his vengeance. All but the last, on himself, for having broken the oath he had involuntarily sworn to the Seigneur. Life held no further meaning for him. It was odious to consider returning to a space rogue's career, and only death offered absolution from his oaths. He directed a blazing beam of force at one of the great pillars that supported the throne room ceiling. It blackened, then buckled. He blasted apart another of the pillars, and the third. The roof groaned. The tons of masonry were suddenly without support after hundreds of years. Herndon waited and smiled in triumph as the ceiling hurtled down at him. The end. Subscribe for your daily stories of futures past. From the pages of dusty old pulp magazines to your ear.